She quickly took the stone off its leg. Thank you, the frog croaked. You are welcome, Whitney croaked. The frog was surprised. You understand me? She asked. I do. My voice is poisoned, and now I can only croak. I speak frogs now, Whitney croaked. I know just what you need, the frog croaked. I don't understand. Whitney was confused. There is a special white flower. It's a white jasmine, and its scent can heal your voice. However, you must be by the side of the one your heart beats for, so it can. The king was informed, and the priest was called. He examined her and asked for some leaves, which he garnished and gave her to drink. So, what would happen now? The king asked. The herbs have neutralized the poison, so it won't be permanent. However, it may take up to 10 years or less for her to talk again, the priest explained. 10 years? The king exclaimed. This is out of my hands, the priest said and left. Philly watched from afar and saw everything that was happening. She jumped for joy in her room and she cried and laughed in excitement. She should have seen her face, croaking like a frog. Now the prince would never look at her side again. He will only look at me. Philly laughed. She was so happy and she sprayed her best perfume and wore her best dress, ready to please the prince. Whitney was in her room, crying. Her brother Jago was beside her. How did your voice get poisoned? He asked, but she simply continued to cry. What am I saying? You can't even talk? Jago sighed. Please don't cry. The door burst open and the prince, Kanto, walked inside. My prince, Jago greeted with a light bow. I heard about what happened, and this needs to be investigated. How did your voice get poisoned? The prince asked. She doesn't know, my prince. Perhaps she just got an infection, Jago answered. Do not worry, I shall personally take care of you, Kanto said. Philly, who was standing by the door, heard everything and walked in. Oh, you poor thing. I feel so bad, Philly said, pretending to cry. We should let her rest. I would make sure I bring your medicine to you myself, the prince said, and they all left her room. Philly and Prince Canto strolled through the garden, and she could tell that the prince was so upset. My prince, you look angry, Philly said. I can't imagine the pain she's going through, the prince said. Me too. She's like a little sister to me, and it is sad what has happened to her, Phyllis said, pretending to be remorseful. What about our wedding plans? Don't you think it's about time? Not yet, Prince Canto said. I'm way too upset right now. That doesn't stop us from getting married. I am 25 and I need to start having children. You need an heir, my prince, Phyllis said, trying to hide her anger. Please stop. If you want to get married so badly, I suggest you look for another suitor, Kanto said. How can you say that, my prince? Phyllis said, looking sad. I'm sorry, but I do not want to waste your time. I'm not even sure about this marriage. You are the town's original daughter. You definitely get the best suitor. Any man will be willing to marry you, Kanto said. Philly immediately ran off and went to her room, crying on the bed. I can't believe the prince rejected me. And it's because of that witch. Now I hate her so much. I will show her what I'm made of. I must be queen no matter what, Phyllis said angrily. She quietly went to Whitney's room and tiptoed to her bedside. She had the scissors with her and cut off Whitney's hair as silently as she could. Immediately she was done, she tiptoed back to her room. The next day, Philly was seated in the garden, enjoying the sweet scent of the flowers when Whitney walked in. She was shocked to see that her hair was full and even longer. But, but, Philly stammered in confusion. Whitney wondered why she looked so confused, but she couldn't speak. Whitney, dear, you should be resting in your room, Philly said. Whitney shook her head and pointed at the flowers. You want to inhale its scent? Philly asked. Whitney nodded. I see. Well, don't stay out too long. And make sure you have a proper rest, Phyllis said, and Whitney nodded. Philly immediately ran to her room and called her mother. narrating everything that happened. That girl is more dangerous than we thought. She has enchanted hair, and a scissors won't be able to cut it. We must pour a special red sand on her hair, and all of it will fall off. I'll get that from the priest, but you must convince her to leave the palace so we can carry out our plan. We can also make her blind. That way, the prince can never look at her. Her mother, Didi said. I love the plan. Thank you, Phyllis said and hung up. She came up with a plan to make Whitney look bad in front of everyone. The king had a favorite pen, and everyone knew not to touch it. Phyllis somehow managed to sneak around and get it and placed it under Whitney's pillow. The king began to look for a special pen, and everyone helped him look, but they couldn't find it. The prince walked into the room to give Whitney a medicine, and Philly insisted on coming to take care of her with the palace maid, who she had earlier bribed. Whitney sat on her bed, and Canto gave Whitney her medicine. Are you comfortable? The maid asked, and Whitney nodded. Let me help you feel better, the maid said, and placed a pillow under Whitney's leg. She also tried to help her adjust the pillow on her head and found the pen. Isn't this the king's special pen? The maid asked. The prince looked at it and nodded. It is. Whitney, what is it doing under your pillow? He asked. Whitney simply shook her head, but she couldn't speak. The prince left, feeling a little disappointed. Soon, rumors spread around that Whitney is a thief. Everyone was gossiping about it, and the whispers got to Whitney. She became sad and she couldn't even defend herself properly. Philly went to her room to speak to her. Whitney, I don't believe you took the king's pen, but everyone else does. Perhaps you should stay with your parents for a few days till the rumors die down, Philly advised. Whitney sat still, with the saddest face ever, and Philly held her hands in comfort. I understand how you feel, and I'll make sure the rumors die down. Meanwhile, you should go see your parents. I'm sure it will make you feel good. Don't worry, by the time you are back, the rumors would have died down, Philly advised. Whitney saw reason with what she was saying. She missed her parents badly, and a few days with them meant that she would feel much better. She left her house and feeling jubilated in her room. Yes, now all I have to do is implement my plans. Oh, I can't wait, she said. Whitney got home and was hugged by her mother and father. She was given a special soup to help heal her throat. One evening, Whitney decided to take a stroll around. She walked all the way till she got to a pond. She could see a frog whose leg was stuck under a big stone. She quickly took the stone off its leg. Thank you, the frog croaked. You are welcome, Whitney croaked. The frog was surprised. You understand me? She asked. I do. My voice is poisoned, and now I can only croak. I speak frogs now, Whitney croaked. I know just what you need, the frog croaked. I don't understand. Whitney was confused. There is a special white flower. It's a white jasmine, and its scent can heal your voice. However, you must be by the side of the one your heart beats for, so it can work immediately, the frog croaked. Whitney was still a little confused. Ho, ho, I can smell bad energy. You must run, the frog croaked and ran away. Whitney noticed the shadow of someone and turned back. It was Philly. Hello, Whitney, Philly said with a mischievous smile. Whitney gave her a sweet smile. I can see you are enjoying the coolness of the river, Philly said. Well, not for long. Whitney looked at her in surprise as the glint on her face rose. Philly quickly threw the sand on a confused Whitney, and her hair began to fall off. Oh no! Whitney croaked. She began to cry while Philly laughed. Let's see how the prince will look at you now, she said. Whitney got angry and pushed Philly into the water. How dare you! Philly yelled and got up angrily. She was about to slap Whitney when she flinched. There was a large red tick on her hand. Ew! Philly screamed and yanked it off in fear. It had bitten her and left a little bite mark on her hand. See what you caused. Who knows what this river creature is? Do not dare show your face in front of the prince. He will eat your bowed head, Phyllis said, and left angrily. Whitney became sad and unhappy. She sat by the riverside. Her tears streamed down her eyes. She could see her reflection in the river, and she looked disappointed. She finally summoned courage and went home. Granny screamed when she saw her daughter. Whitney, what happened? You must tell me, Ronnie said and began to cry. Whitney took a piece of paper and wrote what she thought the situation was about. I can't believe that Philly would do this, Ronnie said angrily and called her husband, Jago. Together, they both went to the palace, and the king's family sat with them and Philly. Didi was also present. So, Philly, what do you have to say to defend yourself? The king asked. Your Highness, Whitney is lying against me. The truth is, she doesn't like me, and she's not a good person. Remember that she stole your pen. I have not even stepped out of the palace today, Philly said. She had earlier made sure nobody saw her leave or enter the palace. Plus, she bribed the same maid that found the pen to act as a witness and say they had been together in the palace all day. The king promised to investigate the matter, and Whitney went back home to her family. She couldn't bear to stay in the palace with the person that made her bad. She stayed indoors all day and night, ashamed that anyone would see her hair. Meanwhile, Philip became sick. The little bite on her hand had turned into a smelly wound. Even her maid was trying her best to avoid her. She bandaged her hand properly and sprayed a lot of perfume around it. Again, she went to meet the prince, but this time in his room. What are you doing here? The prince asked in surprise. My prince, please let's move on with our wedding plans. You need an heir, and the earlier, the better, Philip said, coming closer to him. Philip, please don't do this. I already told you to pick another man, Kanto said. No, it's you that I want, my prince, Philip said and suddenly drew him closer to her. What's that smell? The prince covered his nose. Philip became embarrassed immediately. Kanto's eyes darted towards the wound on her hand. It's coming from there, he said. Excuse me, Philip said and ran out in embarrassment. She went to her room and cried. This is all Whitney's fault. I'll deal with her later. But first, I must treat this wound, she said. She called her mother, Didi, immediately, and they went to see the priest at the edge of town. He examined the wound, and Philly was surprised to see it had grown bigger. What's going on? Philly began to cry. It seems you have been bitten by red poison. It's a very rare, big, and red tick. It's an enchanted tick, and unfortunately, this is beyond my power, the priest said. Are you saying there is no solution? Didi asked. I have no idea. It's so rare that I have never encountered it before. You must seek for a higher power. The wound would spread to her whole body if nothing is done, so you must act fast, the prince warned. Philip began to cry again, and they had no choice than to talk to the king, who in turn sent for the priest. They all sat together in the palace. Where did the tick bite you? I know for a fact that it is not in this palace, the priest said. I fell into the river, and it was Whitney that pushed me. That girl is a witch, Philly yelled angrily. I thought you said you did not leave the palace. Or is there a river in the palace? The queen asked. Philly began to scratch her head. Well, because this is an enchanted tick, it can only be healed by someone with enchantment. Whitney has enchanted hair, I believe. If the tip of her hair is cut and put on your wound, it would heal it, the priest said. Philly was shocked. But she's now bald. That's not good. Getting someone with enchanted hair again won't be easy. It is very rare, and one person I know that has it lives far away. By the time she gets here, your whole body would have turned to wounds, the priest said. Ha! Save me, Philly cried. Enchanted hair doesn't just cut. In fact, it grows back in seconds. I am sure Whitney's hair must have grown back by now, the priest said. Didi put her hands on her head. I am finished, she said. What is it? The queen asked. I have a confession to make. The truth is, we removed Whitney's hair with a special type of sand because it is enchanted. Please, what can we do? Didi asked. So Whitney was right, and you were the one that made her hair that way. You dare lie to royalty, the prince said angrily. Forgive me, my prince. Didi fell on the floor and started crying. Please, I just want my daughter back. I don't want her to decay away. Tell us what else you did. If not, you will receive the king's wrath. Tell us now, or swear on the sacred stone. You know that if you lie and swear, you will develop boils on your body and run mad, the king warned. I'm sorry, your highness, but my daughter and I plotted to poison Whitney's voice. We didn't want her for the prince. Please have mercy, Didi cried. It is up to Whitney to decide if she wants to save you, the priest said and left. Whitney was informed of everything, and she was hurt. However, because of her kind heart, she decided to help fully. Her hair had grown just a little bit, and she hoped that it was enough. She shaved the hair and placed it on Philly's wound. Slowly, it began to dry up. The prince begged Whitney to return back to the palace, and she did. She had missed the sweet scent of the garden. As she walked through, she remembered what the frog told her some days ago. She had forgotten all about it. She quickly looked for the flower in the garden and plucked it. Just then, the prince appeared. I'm so glad you agreed to come to the palace again, he said, and Whitney nodded. Philly and her mother will be banned for their crimes. I'm sorry I let them do that to you, Kanto said. Whitney smiled and inhaled the scent of the flowers. Smells divine, she said. Wait a minute. Did you just talk? Kanto asked in surprise. Whitney held her throat in realization. Yes, I did. It worked, Whitney said and explained what the frog had told her. Kanto was a bit taken aback that she spoke to frogs, but he was happy she had gained her voice back. He held her hands. I would wait for you to get older, Kanto said to her. Then I will make you the queen. Just 3 more years, and it will be a reality. Phyllis suddenly walked into the garden. Her sores were dried up, but it still looked bad. What are you doing here? Kanto asked angrily. I wanted to apologize to Whitney and thank her, Phyllis said. You should be ashamed of yourself. You are jealous of someone that is like a sister to you, Kanto said. I'm sorry. I let my jealousy get the best of me, and I tried to hurt you. That didn't stop you from healing me. Thank you so much, Whitney. You are a better person than I can ever be, Phyllis said, feeling remorseful. It's fine, I forgive you, Whitney said. You can talk? Philly was surprised. Yes, I got healed by the scent of a flower, Whitney said. That's good. I'm sorry I poisoned your voice, but I'm glad you are better now, Phyllis said. Immediately you get better, you must leave this town, Kanto said. Of course, my prince. It's what I deserve. I wish you well, Whitney, Phyllis said and left. Whitney was happy to regain her voice back, and she was able to continue singing while her brother plays the flute. For all their sufferings, Whitney's family was compensated with a lot of money, and as soon as Whitney turned 19, she was married to Prince Kanto and became the soon-to-be queen. Whitney was finally happy. She got a happy ending with the prince of her dreams.